At his mother's funeral, Billionaire finds ex-wife and twins no one knew about. They say funerals bring closure and unity in times of grief. But for Michael Harrington, his mother's funeral unlocked the door to a life-altering secret. Beneath the drizzle of a grey sky, amid a sea of black umbrellas, he caught a glimpse of someone he hadn't seen in years, his ex-wife Rebecca. Michael's heart lurched the moment he spotted two small figures clinging to her skirt. Twins. The disquieting realization struck him like a bolt of lightning. He had children no one had told him about. In that silent graveyard, as the rain mixed with tears, an extraordinary drama began to unfold. The day of Cecilia Harrington's funeral was as gloomy as her death had been abrupt. Thick clouds hovered in the sky like an omen, blocking out any hint of sunlight. Gusts of wind rustled the ancient oaks around the old family chapel in upstate New York. The Harrington estate stretched for acres, rolling lawns, and meticulously pruned hedges that had once made the family's name synonymous with wealth and timeless grace. Michael Harrington, now 35, stood under a wide black umbrella near the gnarled roots of a willow tree not far from the chapel's entrance. Dressed in a tailored black suit, he still appeared every inch the confident millionaire entrepreneur he had become over the past decade. His broad shoulders and tall frame drew the notice of everyone around, but his normally resolute eyes were now tinged with sorrow and a hint of regret. Michael stared at the coffin, draped in white lilies, his mother's favorite flowers. He was exhausted, not just from the past nights of weeping in solitude, but from the overwhelming burden of guilt he felt for not spending more time with her. Business deals in Tokyo, board meetings in London, philanthropic galas in Los Angeles. He had spent his life on airplanes and in five-star hotels, all to expand the Harrington empire. But the last time he'd truly sat down and talked to his mother was 3 months ago, and even that had been a rushed phone call. Now it was too late. The simple hush inside the chapel had been broken only by the solemn notes of the organ. Then came the eulogy from her dear friend, Evelyn Carter, a name well known among the city's old aristocratic circles. Evelyn's trembling voice cracked when she recalled Cecilia's gracious spirit and her unyielding love for her only son. Michael wasn't sure if his mother had fully approved of everything he did, but he knew she had loved him fiercely. That love was etched in every corner of the Harrington estate, especially in the nursery upstairs where she had read him stories of knights and kings, planting the seed of ambition that had grown into unstoppable drive. His mother's casket was lowered into the ground. Family acquaintances, socialites, and a medley of local dignitaries offered polite nods and condolences. Black dresses and austere suits blended with the dreary weather, forming a living painting of grief. Suddenly, a woman's figure stood out in the corner of his vision. Her hair was the same deep chestnut color Michael remembered from a decade prior. Her posture was stiff, as if trying to remain inconspicuous. But as soon as she realized she was being watched, the protective angle of her chin gave her away. It was Rebecca. Her presence jolted him with a surge of conflicting emotions, surprise, confusion, and a trace of bitterness for all the unresolved feelings their abrupt divorce had left behind. He had not seen or spoken to Rebecca since the day they signed the final paperwork. Michael's mother had never spoken kindly of Rebecca. In fact, Cecilia had been downright critical. She had once told Michael that Rebecca was not Harrington material, which had led to countless arguments. But now, at his mother's funeral, why was Rebecca here? What possible reason could she have for showing up after so many years? Michael swallowed a hard lump in his throat and began walking toward her. Then he noticed something that made his heart freeze. 2 children stood beside Rebecca. They were about 7 or 8 years old. A boy and a girl, their hair a shade lighter than hers. though the boy had hazel eyes that struck Michael like a lightning bolt of recognition. They were his eyes, or so it seemed in that startling instant. He approached, each step feeling heavier than the last. The damp grass squished under his polished shoes. Rebecca tensed, as though she couldn't decide whether to slip away quietly or stand her ground. She clutched the children's hands protectively. "Rebecca," Michael said, his voice barely above a whisper, "what are you doing here?" She looked up at him with large, hesitant brown eyes. The children at her side clutched her skirt, seemingly frightened of the tall stranger. Rebecca's lips parted, but no sound emerged at first. Then, after a short, uncomfortable pause, she managed, "Michael, I'm sorry for your loss. I know how much your mother meant to you." His thoughts swirled like a hurricane. He remembered the day he first met her, the day they eloped in a youthful storm of passion, and the painful day they parted. So many words, so many memories they had never sorted through. And now there were these children, twins. The realization that he might be looking at his own offspring caused Michael's pulse to hammer against his ribcage. The boy glanced up at him, curiosity illuminating his face. The girl stuck close to her mother, half hidden behind the folds of Rebecca's black coat. Michael took a deep breath, fighting the tremor in his voice. "Rebecca, are these?" Rebecca nodded, a flicker of shame and desperation in her gaze. "I wanted to tell you so many times. But there were complications." "Complications?" he echoed, feeling his world tilt dangerously. She looked down at the children and drew them closer. "Michael, meet Christopher and Cecilia." The mention of his mother's name on the little girl nearly undid him. He felt dizzy, almost light-headed. The raw intensity of the moment was overwhelming. He had come to bury his mother, and instead he had unearthed an entire life that had been hidden from him. They ended up inside the chapel after most of the mourners had drifted away. The twin siblings, Christopher and Cecilia, had run outside to catch the last few petals falling from a rose tree near the cemetery, supervised by an elderly family friend who had offered to watch them for a few minutes. Rebecca and Michael found themselves standing in a quiet pew, the echoes of footsteps and whispered prayers long gone. A hush settled in the chapel, the dim light filtering through the stained glass windows, casting shards of colored patterns along the polished floors. A faint smell of incense lingered, a final tribute to the ceremony that had just taken place. Rebecca was the first to break the silence. "I'm sorry," she said, rubbing her arms as if she felt an unseasonable chill. "I know that word means little now, but I am. I never meant to cause you this kind of pain." Michael studied her face carefully. The years had been kind to her. Features her cheekbones were more defined. Her eyes still held that spark of quiet intelligence, but there was a subdued sadness that had not been there before. "A letter would have sufficed," Michael said, surprise lacing his words. "A single phone call, anything, Rebecca. Why didn't you tell me I had children?" She took a deep breath, her gaze wandering to the altar, covered in white lilies, Cecilia Harrington's favorite. "Your mother intervened," she finally said. "I tried to reach out after the divorce. I wrote to you, but each time your mother intercepted my attempts. She told me you didn't want anything to do with me or the baby I was carrying." Rage and disbelief coiled inside Michael like a snake. "Are you saying my mother knew about them? That she kept it from me?" Rebecca nodded. "I suspect she loved you too much in her own way, and she thought I wasn't right for you. She offered me money if I'd just disappear, move to another state, start fresh, and never contact you again." 1,000 thoughts exploded in Michael's mind. His mother had always been protective, borderline controlling. As a child, he had admired how she held the family together after his father's death. As an adult, he'd found her guidance stifling. Still, the notion that she had orchestrated this kind of deception ripped open old wounds and created new ones in the process. He recalled a time when, immediately after the divorce, his mother seemed unusually relieved. She had insisted he focus on rebuilding his life. He'd buried himself in the family business, traveling internationally, forging new alliances, driven by heartbreak and ambition. Not once had he received a letter, a phone call, nothing to suggest a pregnancy, let alone twins. "Why didn't you fight back?" Michael said, his voice laced with bitterness. "You know I would have been on your side." Rebecca's eyes flashed with a mixture of sorrow and pride. "You have no idea how intimidating your mother could be. I was young, alone, and afraid. She threatened to take the baby away from me if I came near you again. She claimed she had top-notch lawyers who could label me an unfit mother. I didn't have the means or the support to fight her. And I honestly believed, for a while, that maybe you didn't want me or our child." Michael leaned against the pew, struggling to catch his breath. He thought of the inheritance, the estate, the privileged life he'd always known. His mother had always told him he was the chosen Harrington heir, destined to carry on their legacy. She'd been fierce in her protection, too fierce, as he was discovering. He raked a hand through his hair. "So you've been raising them alone all this time?" Rebecca's eyes brimmed with unshed tears. "I've had help from friends, people who cared. I named our daughter Cecilia because, despite everything, your mother's strength was something I didn't want to erase from our children's heritage." A swirl of conflicting emotions nearly paralyzed him. Anger toward his mother, sympathy for Rebecca, guilt for letting all these years pass without knowing he had children. Questions poured into his mind like a raging river. Had the twins wondered about their father? Did they resent him for not being there? Could he fix this damage now, after so long? Just then, the chapel's heavy door creaked, and little Cecilia and Christopher appeared with the family friend. The children hesitated at the threshold, as if sensing the gravity of the adult conversation. The old friend gently nudged them forward, and they walked in cautiously. Michael stood up straight. He managed a small, tentative smile at the children. "Hey!" he said awkwardly, unsure if it was normal to introduce himself to his own kids like strangers. "I'm Michael." Christopher looked him over, an inquisitive gleam in his hazel eyes. "Are you Mummy's friend?" Rebecca bit her lip, tears threatening to spill over. "He's your father," she whispered gently. The two children exchanged glances, their expressions a blend of curiosity and apprehension. Michael fought the tightness in his chest and took a step closer. "I'm sorry it took so long for us to meet," he said, voice cracking. "There's a lot I want to tell you." As the children stepped closer, confusion lingered in their eyes, but neither retreated. In that moment, Michael realized something profound. No matter how furious he was at his mother's betrayal, these young hearts needed him. His mother's funeral might have been a day of heartbreak, but it was also the day he discovered the most unexpected gift of all, a chance to be a father. The Harrington family lawyer, Jonathan Pierce, convened the official reading of Cecilia Harrington's will 2 days later. It took place in the estate's formal library, an elegant room lined with ancient tomes and crowned by an antique chandelier that bathed the space in golden light. Often, such readings were a mere formality, but given the unusual events of the funeral and recent revelations, Michael was on edge. Michael stood near the tall windows, looking out at the manicured gardens outside. Rebecca waited in a corner chair, the twins seated politely on either side of her. They stared in silent wonder at the high ceilings and meticulously arranged shelves of century-old novels. Although it felt odd, Michael had insisted that Rebecca and the children stay on the estate until the reading was complete. Part of him wanted them close. He needed time with his children, time to piece together the lost years. Another part worried about what secret bombshells might be hidden in his mother's final instructions. Jonathan cleared his throat and took a seat behind a large mahogany desk. He shuffled through a stack of papers with quiet efficiency. His calm demeanor was well known in high society circles. A short, graying man in his late 50s, Jonathan had handled Harrington legal matters for decades. He had also been a close confidant of Cecilia's, which made Michael uncertain about his loyalties. "Thank you all for coming," Jonathan began, adjusting his reading glasses. "We gather here to honor the last will and testament of Miss S. Cecilia Harrington." Michael inhaled slowly, noting the tension in the room. Even the children sensed something unusual, their eyes flitting between Jonathan and the rows of law books behind him. Jonathan read through the standard legal jargon, the dissolution of certain trusts, the philanthropic bequests to the local hospital and art museum, and the provision for staff bonuses. None of that surprised Michael. His mother was known for her charitable heart and meticulous planning. Finally, Jonathan arrived at the crux, the instructions regarding the Harrington estate and the family business shares. He took a moment to verify the page before proceeding. "Miss S. Harrington bequeaths the majority of her estate, including the Harrington mansion, to her son, Michael Harrington, on the condition he adheres to certain stipulations that will be detailed shortly." Michael stiffened. Conditions? He'd half expected something of this sort. His mother thrived on control. He clenched his fists, bracing for whatever ultimatum she had left behind. "But before I articulate the conditions," Jonathan added carefully, "there is another matter." He looked up from the papers, his gaze flickering toward the twins. Miss S. Harrington had prepared an addendum upon discovering the existence of Christopher and Cecilia Harrington. Rebecca's mouth dropped open in surprise. Michael's heart hammered. He swallowed hard. "She knew about them?" he asked, though he already suspected the answer. Jonathan nodded solemnly. "Yes. She included an additional provision specifying that if the children are, in fact, Michael's biological children, they are to inherit a significant portion of her personal assets, in trust until they reach the age of 21. Rebecca let out a small gasp. The children, unaware of the gravity, looked around curiously, bored by the grown-up talk. Michael felt a strange mix of relief and resentment. On one hand, it confirmed that even after driving Rebecca away, his mother had made arrangements for the children. On the other, it was galling to think she had orchestrated their separation, but still kept them in mind for an inheritance. It felt like one final example of his mother's contradictory nature, controlling, yet protective in her own twisted way. Jonathan continued, "Now, to the conditions for Michael's inheritance of the mansion and the controlling shares in Harrington Industries. Miss S. Harrington states, and I quote, 'Michael must demonstrate a stable family life within 1 year of my passing. If he fails to do so, or if he does not marry a suitable partner who can support him in preserving the Harrington legacy, the controlling shares will revert to a family trust overseen by the board of directors. The mansion will become property of the Harrington Foundation and be used for charitable events." Michael's jaw dropped. He could see Rebecca's face go pale. The lawyer's words seemed to echo in the stately library. "A year, a stable family life, must marry a suitable partner." His mother was still dictating his choices from beyond the grave. "It's preposterous," Michael muttered, raking a hand through his hair. "I'm a grown man. I've run Harrington Industries for a decade. The idea that I need to marry to prove some old-fashioned notion of family stability is insulting." Jonathan nodded sympathetically. "I understand, Michael. However, the will is quite explicit. If you want to retain full control, you must fulfill those conditions." A heavy silence followed. Michael's gaze flickered to Rebecca, who stared at the polished floor, wrestling with her own shock. Then he glanced at the twins, who whispered to each other in that secret sibling language, clueless about the ramifications of their grandmother's final stipulation. His mother had always believed in maintaining a respectable facade, family dinners, philanthropic events, carefully curated appearances. Perhaps she had hoped this condition would nudge him toward reconciliation with a partner she deemed worthy. The question was, had she secretly intended it to be Rebecca? Or was this just another attempt to shape his destiny? Feeling cornered, Michael exhaled a tight breath. I'll need time to think. For now, the children and Rebecca can stay here if they wish. We have to figure out a plan. Rebecca looked up, her eyes reflecting a storm of emotions, relief, fear, and something else Michael couldn't quite name. I appreciate that, she said softly. Jonathan stood, gathering the papers. I will give you both space to process this. The official documentation will be sent over. Remember, you have 1 year from today's date to either confirm your adherence to these stipulations or forfeit the controlling shares. Michael stared at the polished tabletop. The Harrington empire, built over generations, was now at a crossroads. In a single stroke, Cecilia Harrington had ensured that her son's personal life and business legacy were inseparable. The question that burned in Michael's mind was, had she done it purely out of maternal concern, or was it yet another manipulation to control him even after death? He wished he could ask her, but the chance to confront her died along with her. All that remained were the remnants of betrayal, regret, and one final command from a mother who still cast a long shadow over his life. Over the next few days, the Harrington mansion felt like a cross between a lavish hotel and an emotional battlefield. Rebecca and the twins were given a spacious suite in the East Wing rooms, once reserved for visiting dignitaries in decades past. Plush carpets and intricate tapestries lined every corridor, silent witnesses to the legacy of generations of Harringtons who had passed through these halls. For the children, the mansion was an exhilarating maze. Christopher and Cecilia roamed the corridors under the watchful eye of a hired caretaker, wide-eyed and fascinated by secret nooks, hidden staircases, and antique portraits of stern-faced ancestors. They giggled when they discovered the old music room with its grand piano, or when they stumbled upon an attic filled with dusty trunks and forgotten heirlooms. Their excitement offered a bright counterpoint to the adult tensions simmering beneath the surface. Michael, for his part, spent much of his time in the estate's private office. Stacks of paperwork loomed over the mahogany desk, corporate contracts, legal documents, and a flurry of messages from the Harrington Industries Board. Word had spread that the will reading had introduced unique complications. Board members were eager for clarity, pushing Michael to confirm his intentions. But how could he confirm anything when his world had just spun off its axis? He had new responsibilities as a father, a near impossible condition to fulfill for his inheritance, and a complicated history with Rebecca that felt like an open wound every time he saw her. They had tried to talk. One night, after the twins were in bed, Michael and Rebecca had ventured onto the balcony overlooking the moonlit gardens. Fireflies winked in the darkness, and a soft breeze carried the fragrance of summer jasmine. It should have been romantic, or at least peaceful, but an awkward tension hovered between them. "Thank you for letting us stay here," Rebecca said, arms crossed, her gaze fixed on the tree line. "We would have gone to a hotel, but the children love the open space." Michael leaned on the ornate railing. "They should. This is part of their heritage, after all." He paused, as if uncertain. How are they holding up? This is all a lot to take in. She brushed back a stray hair. "Kids adapt faster than we think. They're more curious about you than they are about the mansion. They've been asking questions: what you like to eat, what sports you watch, if you read bedtime stories." A pang of guilt shot through him. He wanted to be the father they'd always imagined, but he was woefully unprepared. All his life, he had managed corporate crises and negotiated multi-million-dollar deals, but the simple act of tucking his kids in at night felt daunting. He hesitated, then cleared his throat. "I'd like to, if it's okay with you, start spending time with them. I'm not sure how to do this, but I want them to know I'm here." Rebecca's face softened. "That's all they need, Michael. Just your willingness." They stood there in silence for a moment, the distance between them still palpable. After a moment, she looked away, her voice quieter. "And what about us? I mean, we have a lot to unpack." Michael sighed, feeling the weight of years of unanswered questions. "I don't know, Rebecca. There's so much I don't understand about what happened. But for now, let's focus on the kids, and we'll figure out the rest as we go." She nodded, blinking away tears. "All right." Despite that tentative agreement, navigating the same house proved challenging. Old arguments returned in subtle ways, the differences in their upbringing, the blame for the divorce, the overshadowing hand of Cecilia Harrington. Michael found himself trying to reason with ghosts more than with Rebecca. The knowledge that his mother had manipulated the situation only made it harder to know what was real between them. Meanwhile, the year-long clock was ticking. Michael's phone buzzed incessantly with calls from the Harrington board. Several board members insisted on a meeting at the estate. They needed reassurance that his personal crisis wouldn't destabilize the company. Michael knew they saw him as a figurehead, an extension of Harrington power. If he failed to secure ownership, the shares would be up for grabs, plunging the company into potential turmoil. One morning, John Smith, an old friend and a minor shareholder in the company, visited. John was the only one on the board who openly sided with Michael. A small man with sharp blue eyes and a comforting presence, he arrived to discuss strategy. They met in the estate's drawing room, old oil paintings lining the walls. "This is a delicate matter," John began, sipping the coffee the butler had served. "The board is worried about rumors. We need a clear plan, especially regarding your personal situation. Cecilia's conditions are no secret." Michael rubbed his temples. "I know, but this is my life, not just a business move." John gave a sympathetic nod. "Of course, but you also know how cutthroat the business world can be. If the shares revert to the trust, other board members may try to wrest control and oust you from day-to-day operations." Michael ground his teeth. "So I'm supposed to just marry someone to satisfy a clause in a will?" John hesitated. "I won't pretend it's fair, but these are the facts. And, well, people are talking. They're saying you might reconnect with your ex-wife, that it's more than a coincidence she showed up with twins right when you inherited the estate." Michael's eyebrows shot up. "Are they insinuating that this was planned?" John shrugged. "Stories run wild in high society." Rebecca's sudden reappearance at this exact time raises eyebrows. "People love a scandal, Michael. You need to handle the optics." Fury churned in Michael's gut. Rebecca's arrival had been anything but strategic. On her part, it had clearly cost her a lot of courage to show up. And yet, the rumor mill was churning at full speed. He sighed, leaning back. "What if, just hypothetically, I do consider reconciling with Rebecca?" John raised an eyebrow. "You'd meet the will's condition if you married her. But is that what you truly want?" Michael stared at the elaborate ceiling molding, its fleur-de-lis designs reminding him of his mother's taste for the ornate. "I have no idea," he admitted softly. "I barely know my children. Rebecca and I haven't resolved our past. It feels like a twisted form of blackmail, even if it's from my own mother's grave." John let out a breath. "Take your time, but don't take too long. The board won't stay patient forever." After he left, Michael lingered in the drawing room. He pictured his mother, refined and formidable, seated in the high-backed armchair, orchestrating everything from behind the scenes. She had always wanted him to settle down with a family that mirrored the Harrington ideals. She'd never approved of a quick elopement in Vegas with Rebecca all those years ago. Now, ironically, her final condition might push him back into that very same relationship or risk losing everything he'd worked to maintain. But was that what Cecilia Harrington had intended all along? Another wave of questions battered him, leaving him feeling cornered and uncertain. Only one thing was clear: he had a year to navigate this emotional storm, learn how to be a father, and make a monumental decision about his future. The stakes had never been higher. In the days that followed, Michael found himself compelled to delve deeper into his late mother's private affairs. If she had orchestrated such elaborate manipulations in life, and even from beyond the grave, what else might she have hidden? Late one afternoon, while the twins were napping in their suite and Rebecca was occupied with calls to her part-time job, back in her hometown, Michael ventured into the mansion's attic. The caretaker had mentioned a set of old trunks and chests belonging to his mother's side of the family. Something inside him insisted that he might find clues about Cecilia's motivations there. The attic was a dimly lit labyrinth of antique furniture, dusty portraits, and broken chandeliers wrapped in sheets. Cobwebs hung like ghostly veils from the rafters. Michael coughed, waving away the particles that danced in the shafts of light from a single round window. A wave of nostalgia hit him. He remembered sneaking up here as a child, rummaging through old crates in search of hidden treasures. Eventually, he found a large wooden trunk emblazoned with the Harrington family crest. The lock was rusted but still functional. After some effort with a crowbar, the trunk yielded. Inside were letters, journals, and legal documents that looked decades old. He gently lifted out a stack of letters tied with a ribbon. Their edges were yellowed with age, the ink faded. The top letter was addressed to his mother, postmarked from somewhere in Massachusetts. Curious, Michael read the letter. It was from Anne Richardson, an old friend of Cecilia's he vaguely recalled meeting once at a dinner party many years ago. The letter detailed a secret about another relative who had been cut off from the family due to a scandal. It was typical old money drama, the kind that made the Harrington name so shrouded in mystique. He set the letter aside and leafed through more, eventually stumbling upon a journal with a purple velvet cover. The cursive handwriting was distinctly his mother's. The entries started when she was in her 20s, around the time she met Michael's father. There were notes about social events, family gatherings, small personal observations, but as he flipped through the pages, one passage froze him in place. It was dated 6 months before he married Rebecca. Michael insists on marrying that girl. I see the way he looks at her, and I cannot deny that he loves her, but I cannot let him throw away his future. He's too blind to see the consequences. If only I could protect him from this heartbreak before it destroys him. A chill skittered down Michael's spine. He turned the page to read more. I've taken steps to ensure this union won't last. Rebecca is naive. She doesn't know the lengths I can go to. I won't let Michael ruin everything his father and I built with a hasty marriage. His heart hammered against his chest, anger flaring. It wasn't just that his mother disapproved, she had actively plotted to sabotage his marriage. The next entries grew more explicit, mentioning payoffs, threatened lawsuits, and a strategic campaign to portray Rebecca as an unfit spouse. Michael could barely breathe. He read an entry dated 1 year after the wedding. Success. They've separated. Soon I will finalize this by offering Rebecca whatever sum she wants. As long as she vanishes from Michael's life. He slammed the journal shut, tears of betrayal burning at the corners of his eyes. Anger, pain, confusion, they all churned within him. He had known his mother was controlling, but to see it spelled out so coldly was devastating. She had systematically dismantled his marriage, ensuring that he never learned about the twins, or so she believed. He lifted a trembling hand to his forehead, trying to steady himself. Then he noticed something wedged in a corner of the trunk, a sealed envelope with his name on it, in his mother's handwriting. Swallowing hard, he opened it. Inside was a single handwritten letter. My dear Michael, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and you've uncovered at least some of what I've done. You must believe I did everything out of love. I knew Rebecca wasn't ready for this life. I knew the Harrington legacy would consume her. Yes, I intervened, perhaps too harshly. I regret many things, but most of all, I regret that you will hate me for it. I hope one day you'll understand. The fortune, the name, this responsibility can be a burden. Only a strong person can stand beside you. Prove to me you can find that person, or be that person on your own. Then the Harrington Empire will be truly secure. I love you always, Mother. The letter slipped from his fingers, drifting onto a dusty floor. His eyes welled with tears, a maelstrom of emotions. She had claimed her actions were out of love, yet she had inflicted unspeakable harm. But the final line seized his attention. Prove to me you can find that person, or be that person on your own. It struck Michael that perhaps his mother's conditions in the will weren't just about forcing him into marriage. Maybe she wanted him to choose for himself, to test him, to see if he could love fiercely and protect those he loved with the same uncompromising spirit. She had shown, however, misguided it was. He wiped his eyes and carefully packed the journal and letters back. His chest felt heavy with the weight of new knowledge. Despite the anger, a thread of empathy coursed through him. His mother had been both protective and destructive. A woman so consumed by the Harrington legacy that she had believed her manipulations justified. Taking a deep breath, Michael descended the attic stairs. The time for running from these truths was over. He would have to face Rebecca, the twins, and the board with honesty, but also with a renewed determination. If his mother's final lesson was to test his resolve, then he would pass that test on his own terms. The next few weeks saw Michael attempting to connect with Christopher and Cecilia in earnest. He was no parenting expert, but he approached the task with the same dedication he had once reserved for billion-dollar business deals. Every day, he cleared a few hours from his schedule to spend with them, taking them around the estate's garden, riding bicycles along the paved paths, or playing catch on the expansive lawn. Initially, the twins were shy. Cecilia, the quieter of the two, often hid behind her mother or stuck close to her brother. Christopher, on the other hand, displayed a curious boldness. He'd ask Michael endless questions about his job, about the airplanes he took, about why the Harrington mansion was so big. Bit by bit, that openness melted the initial barrier, and both kids began to warm up to him. One sunny afternoon, Michael decided to teach them how to fish in the estate's private pond. Armed with rods and a small tackle box, they settled near the water's edge. A light breeze rippled the pond's surface, the willow trees swaying gently. "This is boring," Christopher moaned after the first 10 minutes. Cecilia rolled her eyes at her brother, but she too looked slightly restless. Michael grinned. "Give it a chance. Fishing requires patience." He tossed the line expertly, recalling how his father had once taught him the same skill in this very pond. It felt surreal to stand in his father's place, guiding his own children. A pang of nostalgia made him swallow hard, but he shook it off. Rebecca watched from a short distance away, reading a book on a blanket under a tree, occasionally glancing up to observe them. Since Michael's discovery of his mother's journal, a fragile truce had formed between them. They still hadn't delved into the darkest depths of their past, but they were civil, united in giving the twins some sense of normalcy. Time crawled pleasantly by the pond. Eventually, Christopher let out an excited yelp. He had caught a small fish, wriggling frantically at the end of his line. Cecilia laughed and jumped to her feet, cheering him on. Michael knelt beside them, helping Christopher gently unhook the fish and then release it back into the water. "That was awesome," Christopher said, beaming. Cecilia clapped in delight. Their smiles lit up Michael's heart in a way he hadn't anticipated. It was such a simple joy, yet it meant everything. Later, they gathered their gear and trudged back to the mansion. The children raced ahead, their laughter echoing across the manicured lawn. Rebecca fell into step beside Michael. She looked at the kids, then turned to Michael with a warm smile. "You're a natural," she said quietly. They adore you, he shrugged, a self-deprecating grin tugging at his lips. I'm trying to make up for lost time. There's so much I missed. Rebecca's smile faded slightly. I wish things had been different. I never wanted to keep them from you. I hope you believe that. Michael nodded, remembering the journal entries. He could sense the pain in her voice, as real as his own. I believe you, he said, softly, and they left it at that. That evening, Michael found himself in the twins' bedroom, a pastel-colored space that had once been a guest room. Now it was transformed with scattered toys and children's books. The kids insisted he read them a bedtime story. Christopher chose a tale about a brave knight rescuing his family from a dragon, while Cecilia opted for a whimsical story of a princess exploring magical lands. They compromised on reading one short story each. With the lights dimmed, Michael read aloud, his voice attempting different accents for the characters. The children giggled, enthralled by their father's performance. Rebecca stood by the door, quietly watching the scene with an almost wistful expression. After the stories ended, the twins scooted under the blankets. Christopher yawned, his eyelids fluttering. Cecilia rubbed her eyes sleepily. Michael bent down and kissed their foreheads. It was an impulsive gesture, something he'd never had the chance to do before. "Good night," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "Sleep well." As he left the room, he noticed Rebecca wiping away a tear. She turned quickly, perhaps embarrassed to be caught in such a vulnerable moment. But Michael understood. He felt a similar tightness in his chest, an odd mixture of joy at being part of their bedtime routine and deep regret for missing the first 8 years of their lives. He retreated to his study, where a neat pile of business documents awaited. He tried focusing on them, but his thoughts lingered on the children, on the father he was becoming, and on the father he could have been all these years. If only things had turned out differently, if only his mother hadn't interfered. But regrets wouldn't change the present. Now, at least, he had a chance to move forward. Yet, that chance came with the overshadowing condition that he must marry within a year to keep control of the Harrington empire. The more time he spent with the twins, the more he felt that this was not just about fulfilling an obligation, it was about doing right by them. Whether he ended up with Rebecca or not, he wanted to provide them with stability, to stand against the societal vultures waiting to tear the Harrington name to shreds. The quiet hum of the desk lamp was the only sound in the study as he pondered his next move. His mother's manipulations had, in a perverse way, delivered him a second chance, one to be a real father, and perhaps a real husband. But was he ready to give his heart to Rebecca again, after so much betrayal and misunderstanding? The weight of the decision pressed on him. Yet when he pictured the twins' beaming faces, he realized that fatherhood was changing his perspective on everything. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about building a life that included these two precious children who looked to him for guidance, security, and love. He closed the folder of documents, turned off the desk lamp, and made his way to his bedroom. Tomorrow was another day, another chance to heal broken bonds, and another step toward defining the future of the Harrington legacy, whatever that might be. While life in the Harrington mansion continued its uneasy evolution, storm clouds were gathering on the corporate horizon. The Harrington Industries Board, increasingly anxious about the future of the company, demanded a formal meeting to assess Michael's ability to fulfill his late mother's will. The meeting was scheduled in the main conference room of Harrington Tower, a gleaming skyscraper in downtown Manhattan that symbolized the company's global influence. Michael arrived in a sharp navy suit, accompanied by John Smith. His mind, usually a steel trap of strategy, was cluttered with personal worries. He hadn't told Rebecca about the meeting, not wanting to drag her into a potential spectacle. He stepped into the mahogany-paneled boardroom, its circular table surrounded by men and women in tailored business attire. Large windows showcased the city's skyline. At the head of the table sat Alistair Morton, a seasoned executive and acting chairman in times of transition. Silver-haired and sharp-featured, Alistair had a reputation for being unsentimental and cunning. Michael took his seat, forcing confidence into his posture. The chatter died down, and Alistair cleared his throat. "Michael, thank you for joining us. We've convened to discuss the board's concerns about the future leadership of Harrington Industries. Given the unusual stipulations in your late mother's will," Michael met Alistair's gaze. "I understand your concerns. I want to assure everyone here that I'm fully prepared to maintain my position as CEO. My personal life will not interfere with corporate operations." A woman named Genevieve Park, head of the legal department, spoke up. "The board respects your dedication, Michael, but we need clarity. Miss S., Harrington's will states you must prove a stable family life within a year, potentially involving marriage. Are you planning to meet that condition? If not, the controlling shares revert to the Harrington Trust, and we will have to redistribute power." Murmurs spread among the board members. Michael took a breath. "I'm exploring options. That's all I can say for now. The specifics of my personal life aren't for public debate." Alistair leaned forward. "Nevertheless, the company's future is in question. Investors are jittery. We need to ensure stability. If you fail to meet the will's condition, we risk a hostile takeover from outside investors who might buy into the trust or align with certain board members to gain control." Michael's jaw tightened. "I'm aware of the stakes. My mother's will was unexpected for me as well, but rest assured I will address it before the year is up." Alistair's lips curved into a thin smile. "We certainly hope so. If you find yourself unable to comply, you might consider stepping down voluntarily to avoid a public battle. The Harrington brand wouldn't survive a nasty legal fight." A spike of anger shot through Michael. He recognized the veiled threat. "I appreciate your concerns, Mr. Morton, but I have every intention of retaining my rightful position as CEO." The tension in the room was thick. John Smith cleared his throat to diffuse the atmosphere. "Perhaps we could table this discussion for a few months. Give Michael time to settle matters and present a clear path forward." Alistair eyed John, then nodded. "We'll reconvene in 3 months. Michael, we expect an update on your personal situation by then. It's in everyone's best interest to avoid chaos." The meeting ended with terse handshakes and forced smiles. As Michael stepped out into the corridor, John followed, his face etched with concern. "They're circling like sharks," John said quietly. "Alistair, especially, he'd love to see you fail." Michael exhaled. "I know. He's been eyeing the CEO position for years, hoping my mother would hand it to him." John patted Michael's shoulder reassuringly. "Don't let them rattle you. You've got this." But Michael wasn't so sure. He returned to the mansion that evening to find Rebecca waiting in the foyer. She was dressed in casual jeans and a simple blouse, but her posture was rigid, and her expression told him she knew something was amiss. "How was your meeting?" she asked. Michael gave a tight shrug. "Strained. The board wants a firm answer on whether I'm going to fulfill my mother's requirement. They're worried about the company's stability." Rebecca's gaze dropped. "I see." She hesitated, then continued. "We can't avoid talking about it forever." They moved to the drawing room, where Rebecca sat on a velvet sofa, her hands clasped in her lap. Michael remained standing, pacing near the fireplace. "She gave me a year," he said, raking a hand through his hair. "But the board wants an answer sooner. They're pressing me to marry. Some probably think I'll just propose to you and tie everything in a neat bow." Rebecca's eyes flickered with a mix of emotions, hope, anxiety, maybe even fear. "And what do you want?" Michael stopped pacing and looked at her. "I want to be a father to my children. I'm learning how. and I want to protect the legacy my father and grandfather built. But do I want to do it by forcing a marriage under a legal stipulation? That feels wrong. And yet, if I don't, I could lose control of the company. That would affect everyone, thousands of employees, charitable ventures, the twins' future. Rebecca frowned. I understand the weight on your shoulders, but marriage it's not a business transaction, Michael. It never should be. A bitter laugh escaped him. My mother practically turned it into one. Maybe the real question is whether you and I can ever rebuild what we lost. If we can, then maybe it's not just about the will, it could be about giving our kids a real family. But if we're forcing it for the sake of appearances, I won't do it. I can't. Rebecca nodded slowly. I don't want a hollow arrangement either. We had something once, love, passion, but so much has happened. We're different people now. We need time to figure out if we even work together in that way. Michael sank into an armchair, rubbing his temples. Time is exactly what they won't give me. Silence hung in the air like a thick fog. Neither had a solution, and so they lingered in that uncomfortable space, each lost in thoughts of the shared past and uncertain future. Every passing moment drew them closer to a reckoning, one that would determine not just their relationship, but the fate of an entire empire. As summer gave way to fall, the Harrington estate underwent a gentle transformation. Ivy on the mansion. Walls turned shades of russet and gold, and the sprawling gardens took on a mellow, wistful beauty. Inside, life had settled into a delicate rhythm. Michael continued bonding with the twins, learning the subtleties of their personalities. Christopher loved stories of space exploration, while Cecilia was an aspiring artist, forever scribbling or painting. Their laughter filled hallways once shrouded in loneliness. Rebecca found her own place in the daily life of the mansion. She helped oversee the kitchen staff, ensuring the twins got nutritious meals instead of the lavish, impractical dishes the chef preferred to make for wealthy guests. She also assisted with philanthropic projects Cecilia Harrington had initiated but left unfinished: a scholarship fund, a local children's hospital donation drive. As she worked alongside Michael, the tension between them began to ease, replaced by an appreciation for each other's efforts. One crisp afternoon, Michael and Rebecca took the twins to a nearby orchard for apple picking. It was a simple outing, far from the opulent events that usually occupied his calendar. The orchard's sun-dappled paths and rows of apple-laden trees provided a fresh backdrop for a new kind of memory, one of togetherness rather than division. Cecilia insisted on climbing a small ladder to reach the reddest apple she could find. Christopher, not to be outdone, tried to climb a higher branch. Michael steadied him, laughing as the boy wobbled precariously. Rebecca snapped pictures on her phone. For a moment, they looked like any normal, happy family. That evening, back at the estate, the twins fell asleep early, worn out from the fresh air and excitement. In the quiet of the late evening, Michael led Rebecca to a small, private lounge, one rarely used, filled with plush armchairs and soft lighting. A gentle fire crackled in the fireplace. He handed her a mug of hot cocoa, then sat across from her. I haven't thanked you for all you've done, for being here, for letting me be a father to our children. He hesitated, warmth flickering in his eyes, and for giving me a chance to show that I'm not the same man I was. Rebecca sipped her cocoa, eyes meeting his. We were so young back then, and we had so many voices telling us what to do. I didn't realize how much influence your mother had until recently. Michael set his mug down, leaning forward. I found my mother's journal. She wrote about interfering in our relationship, blackmailing you to stay away, even threatening legal action. She convinced me you didn't want to fight for our marriage. Rebecca's eyes grew damp. And she convinced me you turned your back on me and the baby. I was devastated. I tried to protect myself and the twins from more heartbreak. Michael sighed heavily, knowing it was all orchestrated. I'm sorry. I should have tried harder to find the truth. I was so caught up in the corporate world, so resentful that you'd left. I never questioned that maybe she'd forced you out. She reached for his hand. What's done is done, but we have to decide our next step. The board, the will, everything, it's pulling us in a direction that might not be natural. The question is, do we want to go there because it's right for us, or just to appease everyone else? Michael's thumb stroked the back of her hand. Her touch was warm, familiar, yet new. I don't want to lose the company my father built. But more than that, I don't want to lose what we're rebuilding here. The time I've spent with you and the kids, it's changed me. I want us to be a family again, if that's what you want too. Tears escaped the corners of her eyes. I never stopped loving you, Michael, but love alone might not be enough this time. We have to be sure we can trust each other, that we can work through the trauma of the past. He nodded, voice husky with emotion. Then let's take it one day at a time. We have a year, right? We'll see if we can bridge the gap. If, by the end of that year, we're truly ready to be partners in every sense, then maybe that's the answer to all of this. Rebecca's lips curved into a tentative smile. That sounds like a plan. They spent the rest of the evening talking about the children's future, about the possibility of expanding the scholarship fund, even about small details like what wallpaper to choose for the kids' rooms. Laughter, tears, and genuine understanding flowed between them. In that moment, neither was sure if they would end up walking down the aisle again. But a flicker of hope burned brighter than ever before. Their love story had been broken once, but perhaps it wasn't beyond repair. And maybe, just maybe, the best way to honor Cecilia Harrington's legacy was to build a family bound by honesty and genuine affection, free of the shadows that had once torn them apart. Thank you for following this tumultuous journey of love, secrets, and second chances. If Michael's mother taught us anything, it's that the measure of true legacy isn't in wealth alone, but in the depth of our bonds and the courage to face our darkest truths. From a funeral that unveiled hidden children to a will that intertwined business and personal life, every twist led Michael and Rebecca closer to understanding that real power comes from honest love and unity. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more gripping drama unfold, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue creating content that delves into family ties, emotional challenges, and redemptive arcs. Don't miss out on the next compelling narrative. Join our community today, and together, let's explore more tales that remind us of the extraordinary resilience within every human heart.